Marketing is hard. But I'll tell you a little secret. It doesn't have to be. Let me point something out. You're listening to a podcast right now, and it's great. You love the host. You seek it out and download it. You listen to it while driving, working out, cooking, even going to the bathroom. Podcasts are a pretty close companion. And this is a podcast ad. Did I get your attention? You can reach great listeners like yourself with podcast advertising from Libsyn Ads. Choose from hundreds of top podcasts offering host endorsements, or run a pre-produced ad like this one across thousands of shows to reach your target audience in their favorite podcasts with Libsyn Ads. Go to libsynads.com, that's Libsyn, ads.com today.
The Murder Shelf Book Club contains disturbing content related to real-life crimes. Listener discretion is advised.
Could the letters and the scorched bomb fragments help investigators to grasp not just what the bomber did, but why he did it? Could they shed light on what strange motivations arose from FP's life circumstances? If Captain Finney was to make a leap into new ways of thinking about evidence, he would have to do so quickly. 16 years after his debut, FP was delivering more powerful bombs and shrewdly depositing them where dense crowds congregated, a strategy that would present grave dangers during the holiday season ahead. From Incendiary, The Psychiatrist, the Mad Bomber, and the Invention of Criminal Profiling by Michael Cannell. Welcome to the Murder Shelf Book Club podcast. I am your host, Jill. This is part 2, episode 154, Oedipus Rising, on my new trilogy, Incendiary, The Psychiatrist, the Mad Bomber, and the Invention of Criminal Profiling by Michael Cannell. What a first episode, right? But listen, before I begin, I want to also joyously give a shout out to my new Patreon murder bookies, Helen, Brian, Susan, Dana, and Jennifer. I am so glad to be doing this with you, discussing true crime developments, picking the next book to feature on the podcast, and my serial killer case studies. It always means so much to me, and I don't want to do this alone. Also, if you have decided that this is the year you are going to do it, you're going to go to CrimeCon Las Vegas 2026, use my code, all lowercase letters, one word, MurderShelf, and save 10% on your badge. It's at www.crimecon.com/CC26. Okay, so part 1. In Dastardly Days, we found ourselves in New York City in the 1950s. Since 1940, the serial bomber had targeted New York City, planting pipe bombs cloaked in socks across the city, leaving destruction in their wake. The New York City Police Department's bomb squad and detectives are on the case, and despite new technological innovations at their new crime lab, no useful clues about the man known as the Mad Bomber have been found. The governor, the mayor, police commissioner, and Captain Howard Finney, who runs the investigation, are exasperated with the lack of progress, and the public are becoming more and more jittery. The Mad Bomber, who has some mysterious grievance with Consolidated Edison, also known as Con Ed, the electrical utility, is also improving his technique as the bombs are getting larger and more effective. No one anywhere is safe. It is December 1956. Desperate, Police Commissioner Stephen Kennedy holds a press conference, choosing to reveal a great deal of the evidence and information that they have, which had been held in secret for 16 years, sharing it with reporters, hoping that an observant citizen might have seen something that could break the case, and issuing an appeal, quote, to the members of the public to come forward and give the police whatever information they may have concerning this man. The identity of informants will be kept a closely guarded secret, end quote. In the days that followed, the reporters examined a timeline of events and notes dating back to 1940. It was reported that a police officer stated, quote, after 16 years of being secretive about the bomber, we are no farther along than we were when we started. Every hopeful lead has vanished, and the bomber is still as much a mystery as ever, end quote. Reporters were excited to learn so much about the investigation and being included in it, and this enthusiasm was evident in their headlines. However, many false alarms were called in as a result. An American Airlines flight from Rochester to Idlewild Airport, which we now know as JFK, made an emergency landing due to a bomb threat. Hoax calls led to evacuations of schools and train stations, while mail carriers reported strange ticking sounds in packages. Meanwhile, handwriting analysts offered various opinions on the bomber's unique script. All this while FP took his daily walk and tinkered in his garage, perfecting his bomb-making technique. Captain of the NYPD bomb squad, Howard Finney, was worried that their public appeal might be in vain. The crime lab was working hard, but had not yielded useful evidence. Finney now began to wonder whether they could analyze the evidence differently, maybe seek to understand why the bomber was doing it. With the holiday season approaching, more people were out shopping and gathering. All of them were vulnerable. So Finney finally decided to take the unorthodox step of seeking help from someone who could look into the bomber's mind. A colleague who had embraced unconventional thinking was Captain John J. Cronin, the detective who led New York's Missing Persons Bureau. The challenge of solving puzzling disappearances pushed Cronin to adopt some odd tactics. 6 years prior, he had attended a police chief's convention where he heard Dr. James Brussel, a psychiatrist, speak insightfully about the criminal mind. With 30 years of experience as the Assistant Commissioner of the State Department of Mental Hygiene, Dr. Brussel had also served as an expert witness. Hey, maybe he could help find FP. Coincidentally, Dr. Brussel was closely following the case and developing his hypothesis of reverse psychology, which he was using to help identify the serial bomber. And today, we call that criminal profiling. But in 1956, criminal profiling and the Behavioral Analysis Unit were non-existent, and the police did not consult psychiatrists, despite popular detective novels exploring such ideas. Finney urged Cronin to reach out to Dr. Brussel and see if he'd be willing to discuss the case. Initially, Dr. Brussel expressed concerns about his heavy workload at Creedmoor Psychiatric Asylum. With 120,000 patients, he had his lecture schedule, which was also overwhelming, alongside his private practice. And he was also hesitant to test his reverse psychology theory on such a high-profile case, saying, quote, I felt that my profession was being judged as well as myself, end quote. He was worried that if he was wrong, it could lead to a cataclysmic disaster for himself and psychiatry. And what if his insights misguided the police and allowed the bombings to go on longer? Experts had struggled with this case for well over a decade, and what could one psychiatrist possibly contribute? However, Cronin encouraged Dr. Brussel to, quote, give it a whirl. Sometimes the difference between failure and success is a new thought, end quote. Ultimately, Dr. Brussel was convinced to participate, and his fascination with the mad bomber, that really put him over the top, with him agreeing to assist in the largest manhunt in New York City history. Finney and two bomb squad detectives met with Dr. Brussel at the Department of Mental Hygiene. They now surrounded him with files upon files of documents, photos, letters, and evidence gathered over 16 years. Now, before we get into what Dr. Brussel said, I think the doctor quickly assessed Captain Finney and the detectives, realizing that vague psychological jargon would not impress them. I think he recognized that Finney wanted direct answers, and he also refrained from delivering a speech about how psychiatry could improve investigations. The men before him wore determined expressions. These were no-nonsense officers, and despite the challenge ahead, Dr. Brussel began studying the first page intently, then the second, and so on, with the detectives watching closely as time ticked by. Later, Brussel would say, quote, "People sometimes ask what proportion of my psychiatric deductions is science and what proportion is imagination. I don't really know the answer, not in precise terms. I can only say that I always start such a deduction with a solid basis of science, but somewhere along the way, intuition and imagination will begin to take over. When you think about an unknown criminal long enough, when you've assembled all the known facts about him and stirred them about in your mind, you begin to see the man. You see him more and more plainly, and you picture his face, you hear his voice." End quote. Brussel began by providing a detailed profile of the perpetrator, delivered in Brussel's charismatic and confident voice. FP is a textbook case of paranoid schizophrenia. He suffers from a chronic condition which is characterized by persistent, logically constructed delusions. This disorder can often create an aloof and a distant demeanor. Individuals with this condition may hear voices or see things that are not real and fear being controlled by others or other objects. So think about one of the people who wears a tinfoil hat to block radio waves from influencing them. They are convinced that there are conspiracies against them. Reclusive and antisocial, they harbor an intense hatred for imaginary enemies. Now, despite their condition, they can appear quite normal, dressing, eating, nodding hello, even driving a car. However, when part of their delusion is triggered, their tone can change dramatically. Quote, "The paranoidiac is the world's champion grudge holder," end quote, Brussel explained. Most people experience anger, a flare-up, and eventually get over it. But not so for the paranoid individual. Their anger does not dissipate. If they believe that they have been wronged, that anger festers in their minds. And we can see this in FP's rage at Consolidated Edison. Also, this type of disorder worsens over time. The average paranoid individual does not become fully symptomatic until after the age of 30, around the time FP planted his first bomb in 1940. Thus, now he would be approximately 46 years old. Using inferential deductions, Brussel paused, summoning the courage to continue exposing his reverse psychology theory. Paraphrasing now, FP is a symmetrically built male, neither fat nor skinny. Now, he drew these conclusions from the work of a German psychiatrist, Ernst Kretschmer, who correlated body type with psychological disorders. After studying 10,000 patients, Kretschmer found that the majority of individuals with paranoia had athletic bodies, medium to tall, with well-proportioned frames. The probability was 17 out of 20 that the bomber fell into this category. So today, for the record, Kretschmer has been refuted with more advanced scientific investigation. Brussel continued, FP believes he is superior, a manifestation of his self-righteousness. He is punctilious, meaning his attention to detail is excessive. He is overly neat and overly concerned with precision. He endeavors to write in perfect block letters, ensuring that there are no smudges or erasures. This is a neat, proper man. He worked for Consolidated Edison, delivering exemplary work and consistently producing the highest quality results. punctual, neatly dressed, and clean-shaven. He has no criminal history. He has never been involved in brawls, drunken tirades, or anything messy. He has led a model, plain, uneventful life until that injustice occurred, whatever it may be, which now occupies his mind. He is modest, wearing nothing fancy or flashy. Methodical and prompt in his actions, he reflects a diligent demeanor. Captain Howard Finney listened, and he could see it. Quote, "Keep going, doctor," end quote. FP believes that he has been persecuted since his earliest years, particularly between the ages of 3 and 6, when he began to develop his sense of gender identity. Rooted firmly in Freudian psychoanalysis, Brussel explained that shame from forbidden sexual desires likely caused FP to develop an erotic fixation on his mother. Today, we commonly refer to this as having mommy issues. This dynamic very much aligned with the Oedipal complex. FP thinks, quote, "I desire my mother, but that is horrible and unacceptable because she's married to my father, with whom I compete for her love and affection. I feel jealous of my father, and I believe he's jealous of me. My father hates and persecutes me," end quote. Now, while the primal source of this angst may fade from memory, the sense of persecution does not. It grows into a desire for revenge as he seeks a cause, an explanation for his feelings. Freudian theory poses that the Oedipal complex typically resolves itself when boys come to realize that their grievances are misconceived, allowing them to reconcile with their sexual impulses, which eventually finds suitable outlets: girlfriends, lovers, spouses, whatever. However, in a disordered mind like FP's, the perception of persecution shifts from his father to teachers, bosses, politicians, companies, any symbol of authority. Guilt by association becomes part of his desire for revenge. "Ah," said Cronin and Finney in unison. "So that's why FP hated Con Ed in his letters, but he only targeted Con Ed with his bombs early on. Now he had bombed so many other locations that had nothing to do with Con Ed. But to him, they did have some bizarre connection and were conspirators in this persecution." Brussel added, quote, "Yes, he twists it around so that wherever a wire runs, gas or steam flows from or to Con Ed, it's now a bomb target. He had even written about Con Edison and the others, all the liars and cheats," end quote. Okay, all the liars and cheats, that's all the other targets. Now, if FP decided that some entity was part of this conspiracy, he acted with total conviction. He cherry-picked corroborating details, affirming his paranoid premise, and he cannot understand why others do not see what he does so clearly, which fosters his arrogance and self-righteousness. FP believes that he has formed a secret alliance with God to pursue his personal mission. That makes him hard to catch, as he will never reveal his intentions to anyone. Convinced he has divine approval, he feels justified in committing extreme acts to correct what he sees as wrongs and to punish those who reject his claims. But his arrogance, despite his perfectionism, will make him difficult to work with, potentially leading to poverty. He presents himself as well-groomed and well put together. He is a self-sufficient lone wolf. Paranoid, egocentric, he distrusts those he sees as inferior. His obsession with order would cause clashes with his neighbors, who also fail to meet his high standards. Dr. Brussel was now immersed in FP's mind. A paranoid schizophrenic, he would be incredibly difficult to catch. Well, it's 16 years later, Doc. But despite his warped delusions, he still follows through, behaving normally but warily. FP's writings were filled with old-fashioned phrases like treachery and dastardly deeds, often using spaces and dashes for emphasis, suggesting that he might be a foreigner. Quote, "There's a certain stilted tone in the letters, a total lack of slang and of American colloquialisms. Somehow the letters sounded to me as though they'd been written in a foreign language and then translated into English." End quote. Well, the police had long suspected that FP was of German descent, particularly because of his distinctive lettering. However, Dr. Brussel believed that FP was likely Slavic, as anarchists and radical bombings had their roots in Eastern Europe. Finney now asked for clarification, and Brussels explained, quote, "Historically, bombs have been favored in Middle Europe, and so have knives. But when one man uses both, that suggests he could be a Slav." End quote. Finney was skeptical, so Brussels continued, quote, "If the bomber was Slavic, that suggests that he is also Roman Catholic, which would be a clue to his location." End quote. The letters were postmarked from Westchester, just north of New York City, and the bomber likely sent them from a location between New York and an industrial town in Connecticut with a large Slavic immigrant population to disguise his whereabouts. The handwriting in his letters were flawless, no crossouts and no erasures. The letters were almost rectangular, except for the W, which looked like two separate U's with curved sides and rounded bottoms. The misshapen W stood out. Being extraordinarily neat and obsessive, FP would worry about how the world sees him. Thus, any untidiness was significant. So you have 25 perfect letters and one slouching one. Quote, "Language is a mirror of the mind, and that oddly curved W had to reflect something about the mad bomber. Something unconscious had compelled the bomber to write this one particular letter in a distinctive way, something inside so strong that it had dodged past his conscious." End quote. Might the W represent breasts or a scrotum? And that led Dr. Brussels to realize the bombs were penis-shaped. Was there some sexual aspect troubling the bomber? Glancing at the officers, Brussel realized that speaking when he was uncertain would not help the case. As he continued to examine the photos of the crime scenes, he noted the slash that the bomber had made in the theater seats, where he then inserted the bombs. After he had first read about this in the newspapers, it had disturbed Brussel. There really wasn't any need to slash the seats. A careful person would avoid any unnecessary risk to minimize sign of his presence. So why did the bomber take such bold action? Could the seats symbolize the pelvic region of a human being? Was he using the knife as a symbol of penetrating a woman, and then he would push the bomb deep into the gash? Was this a subconscious sexual act? While this is very Freudian, he knew the detectives would think he was just a blathering idiot. So he instead shared that the bomber was unmarried and unattached with no close friends. Quote, "He wants nothing to do with men, and since his mother is his love, he is probably little interested in women either." End quote. The bomber would likely have never kissed a girl or had sex, and since Slavs value family, Brussels predicted that he might be living with an older female relative who reminds him of his mother. Finney listened intently and then asked about the illness that FP had referenced when he wrote, quote, "All of my physical, mental, and financial sufferings will be paid for in full." End quote. Well, Brussels knew this could be anything, but he considered the most common chronic conditions of the time, including the possibility of tuberculosis, but the antibiotic streptomycin would have cured that. Then Brussels thought again, and he diagnosed FP with a heart problem. Finney now reviewed the Brussels profile. It described a fastidious middle-aged loner of Slavic descent who was unpopular with his neighbors and colleagues. He lived in a northern suburb of Connecticut with an older female relative, was secretive and paranoid, and had a deep-seated hatred for Con Ed and other powerful institutions that colluded with them. So now what do we do? Well, Dr. Brussel suggested that releasing the description could be effective. FP craved attention and publicity. He boasted that his bombs were becoming bigger and more powerful, reflecting the insignificance and neglect he had felt throughout his life. While he is clever, few people recognize this fact. And Dr. Brussel noted that FP might struggle to resist the urge to correct any inaccuracies, which could draw the bomber out of hiding. Quote, "I think he wants to be found out now. I think there's a chance he'll come forward by himself if we handle him right." End quote. Oh, a chance to get this guy? Finally? Well, maybe someone would recognize the bomber from the description. Yeah, but then they knew that every crackpot copycat would drive them crazy, running them all over the city chasing bombs. But Finney said he would speak to Commissioner Kennedy. They all shook hands, and Brussel shut his eyes, seeing the bomber in his mind's eye wearing outdated clothing. Quote, "Captain, one more thing. When you catch him, and I have no doubt you will, he'll be wearing a double-breasted suit, and it'll be buttoned." End quote. Okay.
Do you have $10,000 or more in credit card debt? Maybe you're even barely getting by making minimum payments. With credit card debt hitting record highs, National Debt Relief offers real debt relief solutions for people struggling to keep up. These options may reduce a large portion of credit card debt for those who qualify. You don't need to declare bankruptcy, and you may be able to pay back less than you owe, regardless of your credit. National Debt Relief has already reduced the credit card debt for more than 550,000 consumers. So don't wait. If you owe 10, 20, or even hundreds of thousands of dollars in credit card debt, you can now take advantage of this financial debt relief as the cost of living increases. To find out how much you could save, visit nationaldebtrelief.com. That's nationaldebtrelief.com.
Christmas Eve, 1956. Rain-soaked New York as David Cruz, a 19-year-old clerk at the public library, shelved books. The library was busy with students working on papers. There's a change for you. Cruz finished reshelving organic chemistry books and eagerly planned to call his girlfriend to confirm their date that night. Lunchtime came, and Dave went down the marble staircase to the phone booth on the second floor. While retrieving a dropped dime, he noticed a bulky maroon sock under the phone box, which contained an iron pipe. Alarmed, he called his girlfriend saying, quote, "I think I just found a bomb," end quote. He still used the phone booth to call his girlfriend. I would have been running out of the building. People must have been calmer back then. I don't know. Now panicking, he rushed to his boss for help, but decided to throw the pipe bomb out the storage room window, where it landed in a bush in Bryant Park. A security guard was alerted and called the police. Minutes later, 60 officers and the bomb disposal unit arrived in the park with Big Bertha. Sergeant Dale collected fingerprints from the phone booth while the library was cleared. This was bomb number 32. Violent crimes against strangers are the hardest crimes for police to solve, then and now. And as feared, bomb scares escalated like crazy, requiring responders to treat each one seriously. One day, 11 prank calls came in just over 12 hours. This is like one per hour. And psychologists noted that these callers likely sought a momentary thrill or craved attention, but they're diverting crucial resources away from the investigation. Now, one thing that Kennedy had not shared with the reporters and public were photos of the bombs. None were released to prevent copycats from causing further terror. Now, Finney recognized bomb number 32 as the largest one yet constructed by FP. As Christmas carols played outside Stearns, 5,000 last-minute shoppers stood behind police barricades, with hundreds more watching from the windows. The bomb squad, protected by bulletproof glass, approached the bomb, listening for ticking sounds, but there was none. It may have been broken by the fall, or was still silently ticking down. A squad member then cautiously placed the bomb in a steel mesh envelope. 2 policemen then carefully carried it towards Big Bertha. After the truck sped away to the military facility, the plan was to detonate it if it remained intact for 72 hours, as it was too risky to attempt to defuse it. The New York Times front page headline read, "Bomb in Fifth Avenue Library Spurs Hunt for Psychotic." It rehashed much about the case until the last section titled, "Psychiatrist Conceives Image," on Dr. James Brussel. Quote, "A single man, 40 to 50 years old, introverted, unsocial, cunning, neat with tools, contemptuous of others, resentful of criticism of his work, which he conceals. Superior," end quote, describing the bomber. Reading the story, James Brussel was happy that the police had largely followed his advice, and he was glad he left out his Oedipal conclusions. I can imagine that one. Well, a few nights later, the phone rang at the Brussel residence in Queens. Due to his work with violent criminals, Dr. Brussel had an unlisted number. However, calls could still reach him at Creedmoor, where they were forwarded to his home. A voice on the line asked, quote, "Is this Dr. Brussels, the psychiatrist?" "Yes, this is Dr. Brussels," he replied. "FP speaking. Stay out of this or you'll be sorry," end quote. Now, Dr. Brussel tried to keep him talking so they could trace the call, but clever FP hung up. Braving the cold, FP climbed the stairs of the Columbus Circle subway station and admired the marble statue of Christopher Columbus as he approached the newly opened Coliseum, a 4-story exposition hall. Excited for the inaugural car show, he bought a ticket. It cost him $1.50. Feeling the weight of the bomb in his overcoat pocket, he planned to hide it inside while looking at the displays of sedans, Jaguars, and Packards. The crowded hall made him wish he had brought more explosives with him. He imagined the chaos of smiling people suddenly screaming and decided to return another day with a cluster of more powerful bombs. Seymour Berkson, the publisher of New York's Journal-American newspaper, grimaced at Dr. Brussel's profile of FP. That wasn't in his newspaper. After taking over from William Randolph Hearst Jr. 5 years earlier, Seymour Berkson now faced fierce competition from television news. FP had written to the Herald Tribune twice, negatively impacting the Journal-American, but yet the ongoing serial bomber story still sold millions of newspapers. But this competition was really, really fierce. Christmas morning, Seymour Berkson called his assistant manager, Paul Schloenstein, to discuss ways to strengthen their newspaper's position amidst the ongoing manhunt for the bomber. They considered writing an open letter to FP to encourage him to reveal his grievances, possibly enticing him out of hiding with promises of legal and medical help. Berkson liked the idea, but Schoenstein warned it could backfire if FP saw it as a trap, leading to potential blame from the public or the police. Well, in the end, they decided the benefits outweighed the risks. Now, author Michael Cannell details how reporters and copy were produced across the 5 boroughs for various daily editions. Paraphrasing now, reporters called in reports while typists hurriedly typed up stories, leading to the breakneck publication of the open letter to the mad bomber, which began with, "Give yourself up." The New York Journal-American offered him protection from illegal actions and a fair trial if he revealed his identity, promising to publish his story. It was time for him to accept this offer for his own sake and for the community's, as time was running out. The letter included contact information, and while some reporters laughed, the fishing expedition was on and anticipation grew. Now, Captain Finney and the bomb squad detectives were exhausted after another surge of false alarms, with 100 calls coming in due to the Christmas Eve library bomb and Dr. Brussel's profile. Female plainclothes officers joined in the effort to catch the bomber. Tips also poured in, and one from a man in Anchorage, Alaska, claiming that he could contact the bomber telepathically for $56,000. A Connecticut resident reported that his next-door neighbor, who frequently traveled to the city with a mysterious blue suitcase, but only when his wife was away. Well, state troopers investigated, and on opening the suitcase, discovered provocative high-heeled boots. Well, this was just an unhappily married man who sought the company of prostitutes in the city. Okay. Dr. Brussels was often asked to accompany Finney in the hopes of making an arrest. Once, a hospital administrator reported treating a Czechoslovakian bachelor with a heart condition who had worked for Con Ed. As they drove up, Brussels felt his heart racing. Could this be the suspect? However, when he compared hospital records with the bombing dates, they found that the man had been in an oxygen tent during 2 of the incidents, ruling him out as a suspect. Quote, "While we were following down such leads, trying to swallow our disappointment each time, we still kept hoping that the publicity campaign would make the bomber do something to reveal himself," Brussels wrote, end quote. Commissioner Kennedy now added 16 detectives to the bomb squad, bringing the total number to 34. 50 more bomb threats occurred on December 28th, which became known as a prankster's holiday. Detective Schmidt remarked that while 99% of these calls were hoaxes, any could be the real threat. In one incident, a porter at Madison Square Garden found a sock with a pipe in a men's locker room during a college basketball game. The bomb squad evacuated the area and the arena and discovered it was just a firecracker. Another dud was found at the Commodore Theater on 2nd Avenue. Sergeant Dale called these hoaxes, quote, "a screwball's delight. Honestly, for the life of me, I can't understand what they get out of it," end quote. Well, most sane people don't do that. These are needy, pathetic people. Among the calls were genuine tips from people who thought that they recognized a neighbor or coworker matching Dr. Brussels' profile. Many had Slavic accents and lived with maiden aunts or worked with tools. Any could be the mad bomber. Wives wondered about their husbands, especially one from Queens who was convinced her husband fit the description. Quote, "He's plain crazy. Take my word for it and don't bother checking. Just arrest him and put him away. It'll be good riddance for everyone," end quote. Oh boy. The police received a call about a suspicious man at Grand Central Station and apprehended 63-year-old George Cernak, a track maintenance worker. He carried a shopping bag with socks matching those used by the bomber and had a key to a locker at the Rye train station in Westchester. An application for citizenship revealed that he was born in Yugoslavia. Then, while being questioned, Cernak began to sweat and collapsed, dying of a heart attack. Oh no. And investigators could find out little about his background. He claimed to live in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, but nobody there recognized him. As the investigation progressed, more and more hoaxes complicated the search for the man bomber and other impersonators. The sole upside? The large police presence across the city seemed to keep the bomber at bay. Dr. Brussel dismissed any hope of stopping the bomber, asserting that the hoaxes would only provoke him to escalate his violence, driven by a need to flaunt his intelligence. On the night of December 28th, a bomb threat call came into the Paramount Theater at 7:25 p.m. from a man with a German accent, claiming the bomb would explode at 7:55 p.m. Now, if this was the infamous bomber, then George Cernak would be in the clear. 14 officers swiftly searched the theater with flashlights, looking for signs of tampering. They did not evacuate the theater, which I found to be really odd. But the goal in this era was to avoid creating a panic amidst the numerous crank calls. And the odds were that this call was another hoax. The Alfred Hitchcock film continued until the credits rolled around 8 p.m. as the audience exited onto Times Square. Now the police conducted a more thorough search, finding a bomb in row 15 around 2:40 a.m., identical to the one that was thrown in the bush by the library a few days earlier. And this was safely removed. Oh, God. At Fort Tilden, the bomb team dug a 1 meter or 3 foot deep hole and placed these 2 bombs inside. Detective William Schmidt wired plastic explosives to the bomb and then packed the hole with sandbags. Schmidt wasn't wearing protective gear as he did this because it really wouldn't provide safety at this close distance, and he could actually maneuver faster without it. "Fire in the hole!" Sergeant Dale shouted, triggering the explosion. Boom! The blast sent sandbags 5 feet into the air. Both bombs had been real and deadly, and the remaining bomb fragments were collected as evidence. Alfred Hitchcock was actually in New York City promoting his new film, The Wrong Man, which was ironically about a man's long fight for vindication. Given his penchant for revealing the criminal mind in his films, he was asked about FP. Quote, "The mad bomber is a man with a diabolical sense of humor, and he's not a stupid man. You could hardly say that a man who avoided being caught for 16 years is stupid. Whatever has made this man an enemy of society, one can only see a man who is enjoying this thing. He's apparently concerned with taunting the police to try and catch him as he is blowing people up." End quote. Hitchcock also supported the bone-weary detectives whose reality was so different from what was seen on detective TV shows. A bomb scare was reported at the Empire State Building, then the tallest building in the world. Yes, all 102 floors had to be searched. Commissioner Kennedy then announced a $25,000 reward, describing the suspect, FP, as a killer type and mentally defective, with delusions of being a Superman, and he used bombs for a psychic thrill. Kennedy also shared a photo of a small pocket knife found at the Paramount Theater, urging anyone who recognized it to report it. And then New Yorkers prepared to ring in New Year's 1957, titillation mingled with fear. They were under siege and the police were helpless. New York Times journalist Arthur Gelb wrote, quote, "People thought twice before taking the subway. Many people took buses because they felt the subways were where he would attack." End quote. The Journal American newsroom were trying to keep up with the news. 50 bomb scares reported, the removal of a live bomb from the Paramount, and the death of a suspect in custody. As the typewriters clacked, a special delivery letter from Mount Vernon, New York, landed on the night editor, Richard Paperno's desk. 2 days after the newspaper's front-page letter to the bomber, FP's response had arrived, leaving everyone holding their breath. Commissioner Kennedy rushed to the newsroom. Bergson gave the letter to him to read. Quote, "To the Journal American, I read your paper of December 26th. Where were you people when I was asking for help? Placing myself in custody would be stupid. Do not insult my intelligence. Bring the Con Edison to justice. Start working on Lehrman, Poletti, Andrews. These men know all." End quote. As predicted by Brussel, Publishing his profile had brought FP out of the shadows. Unable to resist correcting the record, he matched Brussel's description: gloating, haughty, superior, and defiantly proud, without a hint of doubt. And who were these three men? All right, Herbert H. Lehrman was the former governor of New York. Charles Paletti was the former lieutenant governor of New York. And Elmer Andrews was the former state industrial commissioner, and all had left office by 1942. So it was likely FP's grievance was linked to a workers' compensation issue with Con Ed during their tenure. And there was more. Quote, "The method of bombing will be different before I am finished. The Con Ed company will wish that they had brought me in. My days on earth are numbered. Most of my adult life has been spent in bed. My one consolidation is that I can strike back, even from my grave, for the dastardly acts against me." End quote. FP also suggested a truce, which is interesting, and he provided a list of 9 undiscovered bombs, one in the Empire State Building phone booth, which had been missed, and they needed to stop calling him the Mad Bomber. Well, the letter was clearly genuine, and Bergson wanted to publish it immediately, but Kennedy insisted that the crime lab needed to process it first, and a discussion began. Eventually, Bergson realized he didn't want to jeopardize the fragile trust with FP for one headline, so he agreed to wait to publish. Bomb threats persisted, including one at Yankee Stadium during the championship game between the New York Giants and the Chicago Bears, with 56,836 fans attending. 3 Continental Airline flights to Denver also had to land early due to threats. Thankfully, no bombs were found, although frustration grew. Another hoax later shut down Grand Central subway shuttle for 2 hours, causing major rerouting of passengers, and a suspicious device was ultimately identified as a harmless fake. One hoaxer was caught in a phone booth with $10 in dimes and admitted making a lot of these false calls. He was sent to Bellevue Hospital for observation. More sock pipe bomb fakes appeared at a phone booth at the Fordham Road subway stop, the Roxy Theater, Egyptian consulate, and a Coast Guard office. As these hoaxes continued, publisher Bergson continued to secretly communicate with FP. Early January, the journal American published a message hidden in the personal ads where Bergson wrote, quote, "We received your letter. We appreciate the truce. What were you deprived of? We want to hear your views and help you. We will keep our word. Contact us the same way as previously. CD, City Desk," end quote. Maybe FP would see the message, and maybe not. Only time would tell. It was now a month after Commissioner Kennedy had shared the files with the press, and the public felt a mix of anxiety and strange sympathy for the long-suffering bomber, who had come to be regarded as a kind of anti-hero. And importantly, FP appeared to be maintaining the truce. No new bombs had been found. However, the pressure to catch him increased. Now Kennedy ignored Dr. Brussel's geographic profiling insight, instead focusing on White Plains, Westchester County. This belief stemmed from different terminology. New York plumbers call short galvanized pipes line pipe coupling, while in Westchester, it was known as well coupling. And in a letter, FP had used well coupling in his letter. So he must be from this area. 75 police officers from Westchester, along with Detective Michael Lynch from the Bob Squad, searched Mount Vernon, Rye, and other town records. They reviewed the handwriting on 357,000 driver's license applications, 26,000 court documents, and other various legal records. Con Edison employees in Westchester were asked to fill out fake civil defense forms, and all of this activity spawned rumors that an arrest was imminent. Bleary-eyed, the officers sifted through thousands of pages for FP's distinctive block lettering, including finding several hundred possibilities. Detective Joe McNally whittled the suspect list down to 42 individuals, opening files to investigate each one, every aspect of their lives, as he chugged black coffee. Plainclothes officers intensified surveillance and ruled out suspects that had alibis. Frustrated by their lack of leads, they continued checking Westchester hospitals and clinics for a man who matched the Brussel profile. And then investigators found 67-year-old Andrew Claywin, a Latvian widower who had died of pneumonia in a Bronx hospital, and he generally fit the profile description. In his cluttered apartment, they discovered piles of newspapers, a messy kitchen, and a drawer full of hospital receipts. Not the neat, meticulous guy we thought we were looking for. He had written complaints to Mayor Wagner and Secretary of State John Foster Dulles. While Claywin's handwriting showed some Central European traits similar to those of the suspect, it was not an exact match. Meanwhile, the police had interviewed the politicians highlighted by the suspect, Lehrman, Paletti, and Andrews, but none remembered any disgruntled individuals during their tenure, and any leads they had went as cold as the weather that January, because on the 14th, it was 3 degrees Fahrenheit or negative 16 Celsius. Now, this correspondence with FP, maintaining his trust was ticklish, and then a potential disaster. Another rival newspaper discovered the personal ad exchanges between the Journal American newspaper and FP. Richard Starnes, the editor of the World Telegram and Sun, confirmed with police sources that FP was communicating secretly, and this revelation ignited an even broader media frenzy. That pushed the Journal American to then print a damaging statement in an article calling FP, quote, a psychopathic enemy of society, end quote. Furious, FP accused Berkson of poisoning the public's mind against him, while at the same time he was requesting FP to confide in him. Betrayed once again, the mad bomber wrote, quote, you have the choice of placing the main contents of the letter I sent you before the public, or you better have very good reason for not doing so. Your time is running out. Are you going to tell the truth, or will you betray the people? I will buy a paper on Thursday. The responsibility is yours, end quote. Now fears arose that FP would break the truce and renew the bombing. Berkson now met with Commissioner Kennedy, and it was a decidedly uncomfortable meeting, but they agreed to publish FP a letter with some redactions and editing made by Kennedy. They sought to get some clarification on his grievances, and the next day this was published with 750,000 Journal American newspapers sold. FP's response was mailed from White Plains, and it revealed he was injured at the Consolidated Edison plant, resulting in a permanent disability, and he had no support from the company. He fought for hearings 4 times to address this injustice, but Con Ed insisted he go through workers' compensation, all while blocking his efforts. Despite his complaints and letters, no one seemed to care. He warned, quote, a lot depends on what can be done by March 1st by you people, end quote. Dr. Brussel predicted that being in the shadows would start to frustrate FP, and despite his divine mission, he really wanted to reveal his identity as the man behind the reign of terror, seeking justice. He sought admiration for his cleverness and moral superiority, and he now leaked details about himself, but this alone was not enough to identify him. A search through the vast immigration and natural services files to match his handwriting proved fruitless. More letters were exchanged with FP, seeking additional details so he could have a fair and just hearing. A special delivery envelope from White Plains then arrived. Reporter Douglas Hurley spoke with postal clerk Donald Caputi, who sold an envelope and a stamp, quote, to a big smiling man with a jolly air, end quote, in his 50s, matching Dr. Brussel's profile. After learning about Caputi, the police then interviewed him and had him look at hundreds of mugshots, finding none that matched the jolly customer. A police artist then created a sketch based on Caputi's description, which was believed to be fairly accurate. With the sketch in hand, Commissioner Kennedy privately felt hopeless about catching the suspect, unless he turned himself in. Meanwhile, Bergson appealed to the Mad Bomber again, promising the best medical care and legal counsel. He just had to turn himself in. Bergson had also reached out to the New York Industrial Commissioner, Isidore R. Lubin, and included in an article was Lubin's promise to grant a review of FP's case. Quote, "If injustice has been done to this person by the DOL, I will do everything in my power to see it rectified," end quote. Lubin now directed state workers to search for FP's case, a challenging task with 2,000 compensation cases a year from 1940 back to 1914. And the public continued to follow every article in the newspapers, anxiously holding their collective breath. 2 days later, a letter from FP arrived at the Journal American. He stated that he would turn himself in on January 18th at 2:30 p.m. at the far end of the Coney Island Boardwalk. A reporter, photographer, and a group of nervous police officers waited all afternoon in the frigid temperatures with 6 inches or 15 centimeters of snow on the ground. No one showed. Another letter arrived at the Journal American desk, and this contained crucial information. FP's injury had occurred on September 5, 1931. He had developed pneumonia and 3 months later, tuberculosis. He now spent 16 hours a day in bed. And he believes that a face-to-face meeting with Bergson might be helpful, as it would allow them to discuss matters freely. Now the news staff anxiously wondered if FP would just walk into the Journal American newsroom. Uh-oh. Commissioner Kelly now visited Bergson at his upscale Fifth Avenue address. They knew they had to tread carefully, or FP might slink back into his cave and disappear. Brussel had been correct, predicting that FP was ripe to share his story of betrayal and martyrdom. Penning a reply to him, given their now established trust, they wrote, quote, "On this basis, we urge you to come forward to avail yourself the opportunity for justice offered you. Please outline the procedure you would like to follow for the face-to-face meeting," end quote. Only this was never published, and things would begin to happen rapidly. Exasperated, the police concluded that the Westchester County investigation had reached a dead end. And behind the scenes, an urgent paper chase began at Con Ed's Hester Street warehouse in Manhattan. Target date, September 5th, 1931, specifically looking for an incident when a Con Edison employee was injured, developing pneumonia and TB. Rows and rows of filing cabinets held closed dead files, compensation cases of former employees. Now, if you remember, Con Edison had previously denied the existence of such records. Well, the police sifted through 60,000 files for employees matching the scenario, but these files only went back to 1940. When they requested older files, Con Ed again denied that any of them existed. Well, no shocker, they are lying. Quote, "In reality, Con Ed was hiding them, possibly because they contained embarrassing information about injury and illness caused by air quality at the company's plants. The company had removed 1,000 files marked troublesome, sending them to a set of filing cabinets housed on the second floor of their Irving Place headquarters, where they could be examined without police meddling. 4 Con Ed clerks and a supervisor had begun a secret review of the files on January 15th, the day the journal American published the bomber's letter. End quote. January 18th. They had about 200 files left to sort through when the police began insisting that they see these files. Now, if this doesn't piss you off, they're obstructing justice because they're embarrassed about their company in the middle of a grave public menace. That's just not right. Well, at 4:20 p.m., Con Edison clerk Alice Kelly discovered the words injustice and permanent disability in red ink at the top of a file. Inside, the pages looked typical. Applications, a claim letter regarding a George Metiski, who had been hired as a generator wiper in 1929 at the Hell's Gate power plant, making $37.50 a week. After suffering an injury from a boiler explosion in 1931, he was dropped from the payroll a year later and submitted a compensation claim in 1934. His letters were unremarkable until Con Edison rejected his appeal 2 years later. Now he threatened, quote, to take justice in my own hands for Con Ed's dastardly deeds. I think we have it, Alice announced, end quote, realizing this was significant. Her colleagues gathered around reading, and Alice then handed the letter to her supervisor, Herbert Schrank, who confirmed that she had found him. Schrank telephoned Lieutenant Schenkler, who took down the information. Now, you might assume that the police quickly jumped in a vehicle with Dr. Brussel and drove to the suspect's home, but they did not. Being cautious after many false starts, they decided to gather more information about George Metiski first. He resided in Waterbury, Connecticut, an industrial city with a population around 100,000. Captain Finney now contacted the Connecticut Motor Vehicle Bureau to request any license or car registered under Metiski's name. However, none existed. He then sent a teletype message to the Waterbury police asking for a discreet check on George Metiski on 4th Street. Now, using the teletype, this meant the request was of medium importance. If it had been urgent, a phone call would have been made. Well, up in Waterbury, Connecticut, the chief of detectives, Captain Ernst Pakul, received the teletype. Investigating, no one named Metiski lived in Waterbury. However, the name George Malokis was listed. Pakul suspected that they were the same person. Lithuanians often Americanized their names, but never changed the official records. Detective Paul Salvador was sent to snoop under the guise of investigating a hit and run. Now, the Malokis house was run down, but fitted with the neighborhood, and the mailbox had both names confirming Pakul's suspicion. As he spoke to locals, Salvatore learned that Metiski was a reclusive invalid living with his cold, peculiar spinster sisters. At 4:37 p.m., Pakul teletyped the New York PD that, quote, chronically ill, unmarried man lived at that address with 2 sisters. Acquaintances describe him as strange and aloof with a history of run-ins, end quote. Finney's eyes widened. That was exactly Brussel's profile. Monday, January 21st, 1957. Detective Bertram Scott picked up the Metiski files from Alice Kelly, and he read through the papers with growing excitement. Quote, this sounds an awful lot like our man, end quote. Then they saw the date of Metiski's injury, September 5th, 1931, the same date FP said in his letter that he had been injured. FP had known this date was a crucial bit of evidence, but he disclosed it anyway. And Dr. Brussel wrote, he was like a supremely confident boxer who, jeering at a weaker opponent, momentarily drops his guard and offers his chin, daring the opponent to try for the kill. 3 hours later, 3 bomb squad officers, led by Detective Mike Lynch, drove 80 miles to Waterbury, Connecticut to prepare the arrest. They met Captain Pakul, who shared insights from Salvador's canvassing. Neighbors described Metiski as eccentric and queer, meaning odd, not gay. His older unmarried sisters, Anna and May, lived with him on the ground floor, while boarders rented the second floor. They enforced strict noise and water use rules. Their father, a Lithuanian immigrant, had been a night watchman and built the house in 1924. His wife, Anna May, had never learned English and had pampered their son, George. After her death, Anna and May had continued to dote on him, never marrying and often wearing the same old clothes. Neighborhood children believed they practiced magic, while the Meteskis sent letters complaining about noisy kids to their parents. One day, when a ball rolled towards George's garage, he accused the boys of spying on him as they ran to retrieve it. Detective Lynch arrived at the Watertown police station and met with Captain Pakul to compare Meteski's handwriting from the Motor Vehicle Bureau with his Con Ed file. He also confirmed that Meteski had no criminal record in Connecticut. By 8 p.m., they visited a former tenant, Kelly, who had clashed with Meteski in 1942, while Kelly was working for a local Navy contractor. Kelly considered Meteski unstable, and he remembered that the draft board had rejected George Meteski due to lung disease. George Meteski had blamed his rejection on his tenant, Kelly. Well, paranoia there. George also wrote to President Roosevelt, demanding that Kelly be sent to the front lines. Well, Kelly now diagrammed the Meteski residence to make it safer for law enforcement. At 10 p.m., a prosecutor and city court judge signed a search warrant. Back at the New York City Crime Lab, Joe McNally reviewed Meteski's handwriting, finding the FP letters and the letters on Meteski's Con Ed file to be virtually identical. But he hesitated to get too excited given the number of repeated dead ends. At 11:45 p.m., 3 police cars pulled up in front of the dark 3-story house on 4th Street. Lynch and 4 detectives stepped onto the creaking porch, while 2 others went by the rear door. Pakul knocked, and a light turned on, and the door opened to reveal George Meteski, a middle-aged man in round gold-rimmed glasses and burgundy pajamas, looking as if he had just woken up. Pakul introduced the detectives, explaining that they were investigating a hit-and-run and had a search warrant. Meteski's expression was blank, but his eyes hinted at amusement. Inside, the peeling wallpaper and faded curtains suggested years of neglect. Meteski now asked officers to speak quietly so as not to disturb his sisters, and he agreed to show them his bedroom, which was small and very neat. 2 New York City subway tokens were laying on the dresser, and he had a loaded .38 caliber Smith & Wesson in the closet. Meteski knew why the officers were there, and they knew that he knew. They discovered a notebook with more handwriting resembling FP's, and when they asked him to write his name, the letter G showed the same unique double bars at its base. They instructed him to get dressed and requested to see the garage. Meteski perfectly matched Dr. Brussel's profile. Slavic, middle-aged, medium build, living with older female relatives, and having a history of work and neighborhood disputes. When Meteski stepped out of his bedroom, he was dressed in a buttoned, double-breasted suit, spot on Dr. Brussel. Heading to the garage, George unlocked the door and turned on the lights. The garage was spotlessly clean and orderly, as expected, with rolls of tools methodically hung on the wall. A metal lathe was positioned on the workbench. Detective Lynch looked around, saying, quote, "George, we're from New York. You know why we're here, don't you?" Shrugging, he denied it. But then he said, "I guess because you suspected I'm the mad bomber?" And Lynch replied, "George, Tell me, what does FP stand for? He exhaled and replied, fair play, end quote, as the near 17-year manhunt came to an anticlimactic end. By now, the sisters awakened, thinking the men must be there to give George the compensation that he was owed all these years. And instead, they saw their brother led to a police cruiser. Quote, but George couldn't hurt anybody. He's a gentleman in every way, end quote. In the uncomfortable interrogation cell in the Waterbury police station, George Metesky sat facing Detective Lynch while 5 others stood against the wall. The moment was tense, but George was cooperative and eager to share his story. Over 6 hours, he discussed the first bomb he planted in 1940 on the Consolidated Edison windowsill, along with the other bombs and letters. He provided a list of 15 unidentified bomb units, as he called them, bringing the total to 47. Though he hesitated at the word bomb, he remembered every detail about the bombs and their locations. Quote, once I fixated on a place, that's where I had to go. It wouldn't change, he said, end quote. That is fixation of thought, an obsessive, rigid preoccupation with a single idea, person, or object, preventing cognitive flexibility and the ability to view situations from new perspectives. And Freud was spot on with this concept. George proudly described bomb-making techniques that only the bomber would know. The bomb squad had long puzzled over his homemade detonator fuses and an odd sticky substance that they found. Eager to explain, George produced a cough drop, a lozenger. Quote, I use these as timers, but had to be very careful. I shaved the lozenger to 1/32 of an inch. Before planting the bomb, I added a drop of water, which triggered the bomb after 30 minutes, end quote. He was quite proud of his ingenuity. After the 16th bomb, George had found the dissolve rate of the lozengers too unpredictable. If the lozenger dissipated too quickly, he barely had time to escape, which is what happened at Radio City Music Hall. To improve this, he designed a new fuse using $5 wristwatches, making the process much safer. He religiously wiped his fingerprints off everything, including the letters he mailed. Initially, he was ignored by the media, and he began to target busier venues such as train stations and movie theaters. When asked about the injuries he caused, he said he felt sick, but he continued because he had vowed to keep placing bombs until he was dead or captured. And then the news of Metesky's arrest leaked through the Waterbury Republican newspaper, reporting that they had a confession. A flock of reporters gathered at police headquarters, while night dispatcher William Lamb skillfully deflected inquiries, saying, no, I'm sorry, we can't tell you anything. At 3 a.m., Captain Pakul told the reporters, quote, there's absolutely no question about it. He's the guy, end quote. An Associated Press photographer captured an image of Metesky in his holding cell, which made headlines across the country the next morning, showing the mad bomber smiling with his hands on the bar, with his thinning hair and receding chin. And this photo is on my blog at www.murdershelfbookclub.com, February 2026. So, with the suspect in custody, I will pause the case of the mad bomber. Incendiary by Michael Canal, Part 3, Second Cast, Laws of Sanity, will drop soon. And so many questions that we have had through these first 2 episodes will be answered as the criminal justice system clashes with the psychiatric community. And Dr. Brussel's reverse psychology, or criminal profiling, is tested, leading us to murder cases and to Boston, where a serial killer has left a trail of bodies. Subscribe so you never miss an episode. And thanks to my Patreon murder bookies, our next book is While She Slept by Marion Collins. You know, Men and women fall in love, get married, and then life happens. Relationships fray, divorces happen. We see this happening every day. However, as people who follow true crime know, we know that not every failing relationship follows the normal trajectory. This is that story. Divorce is being explored, tensions are rising, and then a horrific assault occurs, throwing families into chaos, panic, fear, anger, and denial. Recovery from a head wound is always fraught. 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, 2 steps forward again, 1 step back. And the legal wheels of justice are going to turn slowly, slowly enough for a horrifying event that ends in a shocking murder. So read with me, or let me read for you, as we delve into the incredible book by Marion Collins, While She Slept. And I would love your help. If you enjoy my podcast, please take a moment to leave a glowing 5-star review wherever you listen. Your support is crucial in attracting more murder bookies. Recently, I had a rather disheartening 1-star review that doesn't quite capture the essence of who I am, because I don't know when I've ever argued with people. I mean, who am I arguing with, myself? Well, anyway, if my podcast brings you any entertainment, perhaps new information, I would be incredibly grateful if you could share that love in a review. Your time and attention means the world to me. You can join me on Patreon for our exciting monthly Zoom calls, and our serial killer class is on the first Thursday of the month, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. More exciting news, my merch shop is open, and with the Hamptons Whodunit coming up in April and CrimeCon Las Vegas in May, you won't want to miss out. And Jan, who does my merch, is so incredible. And if you still need a ticket to CrimeCon, use my code MurderShelf and enjoy a 10% discount. You can find me on X, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and LinkedIn. All of my sources are available on my blog at www.murdershelfbookclub.com, February 2026. Don't hesitate to reach out to me at jill@murdershelfbookclub.com. Thank you so much for being with me on this journey. I see you as you hear me. Trust your gut, murder bookies. Written and produced by Jill, all rights reserved. Music, The Pewter Elephant by Blue Dot Sessions.